Although Americans cast their ballots for Election Day weeks ago, the fate of the Senate is still undecided, and it all comes down to two Senate runoff races in Georgia. A CBS News article takes a deep dive into the runoff races, which has two Republican incumbents defending their seats against Democrats. So what do the exit polls indicate about the state of these runoff races? I want to bring in the co-author of that article, LaCrai Mitchell. She is a CBS News campaign reporter. LaCrai, welcome. Great to have you with us. So do we have an idea yet of turnout?
What we can say so far is that as of last week, already there were more than 824,000 absentee ballot requests that had been received by the Secretary of State's office in Georgia. And we know that that is the big question that we are going to continue to ask in these coming weeks. What will turnout be like? Because we know that, as has been the case in other states too, even in the general, it is a matter of the margins in these elections and who is able to peel off voters from the other side. Another thing to keep in mind, though, is that in the last Senate runoff back in 2008 in Georgia, there were roughly 2.14 million people that voted in that election. And so that's a number that I imagine we will do some comparing to as we see what the turnout is in terms of early voting, in terms of the absentee ballots that are received. Georgians have until January 1st to request their absentee ballots, but the Postal Service says that you should get those requests in as soon as possible. Another thing to keep in mind is that voters can register for this runoff until December 7th, and early voting is slated to begin on December 14th. But like in other states too, I think what we're going to continue to see is that these totals for mail-in ballots or absentee ballots are going to be high like they were in the general election, certainly higher than we've seen in other Senate runoffs in this state. I imagine that the pandemic, also the holiday season, and it being just a time of the year where people are typically busy, absentee voting could be an option that people are considering more so even than they were during the general election. But that is yet to be seen, and we will keep monitoring that.
Well, as you mentioned, though, elections this tight take place in the margins. Where can these candidates look as they try to shore up more support? Is there any, corner of the state that hasn't yet had its doors knocked and its, its local diners overrun?
As we spoke with political scientists and strategists on the ground, a block that one political scientist at the University of Georgia told us to take a look at is Latino voters. In November, Latino voters made up 7% of the state's electorate, and that's a group that continues to grow in the state. And while both parties have really shored up their core supporters, and there may not be as much wiggle room with people who are staunch Republicans or staunch Democrats, this political science professor Trey Hood at UGA said that Latino voters could be a place where either party could pick up what they need in order to clinch this race. Another thing to keep in mind is that nearly a third of Latino voters went for Reverend Raphael Warnock, who is the Democratic challenger to Republican Senator Kelly Loeffler in the November election, and Democratic challenger John Ossoff, who's going against Republican Senator David Perdue, he actually received less support from Latino voters, 52%, than what President-elect Biden was able to garner in the state, which was around 62% of the Latino vote. So that could be an option in a place where some believe that both political parties can look in order to get that extra oomph that they might need. In addition to, of course, keeping the people who voted for them in November coming back out and voting in this January runoff.
Right, keeping that enthusiasm. All right, well, LaCrai Mitchell, thank you so much.